What's going on, everyone? I'm very excited to share this interview that I did with the CTO and lead developer of Telos and the Telos blockchain. It was very fascinating. I learned a ton, some very, I would say, bullish information, and makes me excited about Telos. We talk about their fair launch. We talked about some of the places that it outperforms the other layer ones, which is very interesting, very exciting. We talked about their roadmap, things that are coming up, what they're working on, their zero knowledge proofs, which is very fascinating. We also got into a bit of artificial intelligence and how he thinks that's going to affect the crypto space and how that's going to affect Telos, and it's very fascinating. I'm going to be giving away 5 Solana tokens to one of my subscribers when I hit 1,000 subs, so hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and I hope you enjoy.
No.
Okay, cool. So I'm Jesse. I'm the CTO at Telos. I've been with Telos since before we launched, which was 5 years ago. And fortunately, knock on wood, no downtime in 5 years, which has been great. We launched 2018 kind of in the bear market and had no ICO, like 130 plus people kind of got together and contributed to launching it. And I was one of those people, along with a bunch of others that are still around. And then we had a bunch of new people too. So before getting into blockchain in 2017, I was in enterprise software. Spent a lot of time learning the ropes of building software, kind of for the business, big enterprise businesses, and kind of doing things at scale, automating things, things like that. And then got into blockchain. I love new technology, and got into blockchain, kind of invested a little bit, followed my money, started tracking like GitHub instead of Twitter. Everybody's watching Twitter for like hype, and I was like looking at the source code to see like, are these people actually building something or just posting on Twitter, So that's how I got into it. And I'm like, I'm going to build something, and found Telos, the technology, liked it. It's been a great 5 years and a really exciting, last couple of years, and things are really starting to heat up lately for us. So, we're growing and got a lot of stuff planned that we're really excited to build. So it's fun.
That's great. Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the fair launch of Telos and why that is kind of so valuable to people who are thinking of investing in Telos, and why that kind of separates you guys from other chains that did ICOs and things like this?
Yeah. So when you think about like decentralization, and that's a critical component, right, of blockchain, and decentralization, I always say, is like a spectrum. You're not going to be, you can be, 100% centralized, and you could be 100% decentralized to an extent, and we've accomplished being very far to the decentralized side. So when you think about like the ICO or lack of an ICO and how you distribute the tokens initially, having a really flat distribution leads to a really strong decentralization factor, right? So you have a lot of people holding the token. We at Telos have an on-chain voting system. So any decisions that are pertinent to the network are voted on by the token holders. And being a DPoS chain like many others, the token holders decide who the validators are. So if you have too many tokens in control of like a single entity or a couple of big whales, you may have thousands of token holders, but what really matters is what these small few like whales decide to do. So when we launched, we did a very fair distribution of the tokens. We didn't sell any to a VC, and so that's kind of where the ICO angle comes in. When you raise money initially, you don't have a market cap, or maybe you've launched and you just do a pre-sale after launch or something. You end up concentrating that power, right? Because you concentrate with those VCs. They're going to give you a fair chunk of money, but they're also going to want 20, 30, 50% of the supply. And now they control the market. They control the decisions of the network. They have concentration of power there. So by launching without raising money, we distributed to thousands and thousands of addresses kind of through a Genesis snapshot. Didn't raise money from those addresses, and the team, if you will, was about 130 people that all worked together for about 6 months to actually launch the network. And we have this interesting system where whatever you contributed went into like a pie, and then whoever contributed significantly more than others got more of the initial distribution. But we were all sharing, I think 6%, 5.5% of the supply. So even the team and the people that launched it didn't like start off with any controlling stake. And you don't have some of those problems we've seen with networks that start with like a strong VC presence, it gets them a lot of attention, and the VCs do a lot of work behind the scenes, bringing in their network, their applications, their partners, and in some ways probably there's people would argue some market things that they do on the market with their tokens and trying to influence the price of the token, like all that stuff that VCs do. Some people think it's great, but then when they exit, that's a big exit, right? So if they decide they're no longer involved in the project, or like let's look at FTX and Alameda, right? Like they have problems because VCs or types of organizations like that maybe do something like Alameda and FTX did, and they have to liquidate everything. It's like the projects all suffer because they were supported by these entities that kind of screwed up. So we don't have that risk. It's a blessing and a curse. We started off with no money. Like everybody that was contributing for years was contributing to earn the Telos token, and in hopes that it becomes worth more to be part of this kind of grassroots decentralized movement of building a layer one. But we didn't have money to pay people, so everybody was there out of true genuine interest in what we're doing, and now we've got funding, but the funding came in after years of open market trading, and that didn't come in with 50% of the supply going to a VC. So at this point, it was a great decision. It was hard in those early years, but now it's built that foundation for us that I've said this to some other people. I don't think you could do that in 2024. You couldn't launch a chain with no money and actually survive and become competitive. You probably would fail, right? So you kind of have to take VC money early if you're trying to launch a new chain, and we probably couldn't do that again. But fortunately, we did in 2018 and survived through till now. So
yeah, I think especially every time I feel like altcoins or a project survives a winter or a bear market, it's like a pretty strong testament. One thing I think that, at least when I'm looking at getting into a project, and I'm always really interested in, especially with layer ones, is because you guys are competing like these, because you also say you're a layer 0, or like your kind of top branding mark is like the fastest EVM. And I do want to get into EVM, like what exactly. I've been researching EVMs. I'm trying to like get in layman terms of like what exactly an EVM is. But kind of what would you say to the like value add or like a developer's thinking of building a project? Like why build on Telos versus building on another blockchain?
That's a good question. So there's a lot of answers to it. As far as like who do we compete with? We're all competing, all the networks, all the layer ones are competing for that developer attention, right? Competing to be the chain that the next, huge app decides to build on, right? Why do you build on Telos? There's a lot of reasons. The decentralization factor, the things that we already talked about there from that perspective. But from the technology perspective, we have half-second block times. We've benchmarked at like 15,000 transactions a second. And so we have a lot of throughput. The gas price is actually fixed, so it doesn't like go up and down. It's not a volatile thing. And that kind of comes back to like, well, if we can, I like the analogy. If you're at a stadium and there's nobody in line, why would you cut in line? Why would you pay to cut in line? Why would you pay more when there's nobody in any of the lines? You can walk right through any gate and get in the stadium. So why would you, pay to go in the back door? Whereas on other networks, there's big lines, right? Everybody's kind of waiting for their transaction to be in a block, and so if you pay more, you get to the front of the line. But for us, because we have no bottlenecks and we have, the throughput to handle a lot of transactions, a lot of users concurrently, then there's no reason to allow people to pay more to cut in line, which leads to another, key value prop, which is no front running, right? So you can't pay to cut in line, so you can't front run other people's DeFi transactions. So when you think about trading, you don't have to worry about somebody doing the sandwich trade and front running your sell or your buy in a DeFi type application. So there's those. We do have a really good, strong community. A lot of the apps, actually, technology aside, because we talk about technology, but really a lot of times the networks that are getting adopted doesn't really have as much to do with the technology, right? They're not going there because of half-second block times and high throughput. They're going there because of the community, because of the attention, because there are people that will support them, because you need that, right? Before you need 15,000 transactions a second, you need, 15 users and then 150 and then 1500 users, before you're going to get to really even need the performance that we can offer. So we have a really strong community, and the leadership is very available. So there's been more than one app that's told us we chose to build on Telos because you guys picked up the phone, metaphorically, like you guys were there, you wanted to get on calls, you wanted to talk about stuff, answer our questions, help us figure out maybe some things that, we were trying to solve, and you guys jumped in and helped us solve them. Like that type of stuff is also something that really differentiates us, because a lot of other networks, they're so big. Really the goal to me is bringing in the mass adoption, right? So if we talk about competition, on one hand, all the networks are competing with each other, but we're competing for a piece of a very small pie. And what we're really competing for is the Web 2 users, right? We're competing with, we're competing as a whole to demonstrate the technology, the Web 3 decentralized permissionless type, blockchain technology is relevant and does solve problems in a totally new and unique way that right now, if you look at Web 2 and, my background being in kind of big enterprise software, I've seen how inefficient and completely, like, even within a company, they're trusting the one guy that, built the one thing that they can't fire because he's the only one who knows how it works, and it runs on this machine that's, at this, in the closet of this one office, right? Like those type of things are all over the place. And so if you add blockchain, then you can add a whole nother element of trustlessness, self-custody, permissionless access to data and systems like that, which can really disrupt and deliver for like the end user. It can deliver a much better experience, because there's one way, like, oh, if we steal some other network's community and users, then we get to grow, right? But if you took the whole Web3 user base and you 10x'd it, then everybody gets, all the rising tide lifts all ships. So if we can bring more people into blockchain, well, it doesn't matter if we have to steal somebody else's users, as long as we just, 10x everybody's users, because we get mass adoption. And you get that through, demonstrating good technology, like, our half-second block times. When you go send an email, you don't want to wait 12 seconds to see that, it was sent, right? You want to see it happen right away. So as we get more blockchain technologies getting adopted that can offer that kind of Web 2 experience where things happen quickly, you don't wait. If things are busy, you're not even more congested and more slow. It's just kind of things happen like you would expect in a normal Web 2 application. That's going to be how we, as an industry, get those Web 2 people to finally come in and actually, maybe on a day-to-day or even just a few times a week basis, use blockchain for, what it's really good at, and actually understand why it's a good technology for the things that it ends up being used mainstream for.
Yeah, well, from a mainstream perspective, you're taking Web 2 customers. I feel like the goal is that the blockchain is invisible and the the Web 3 aspect is invisible. It's like the next Facebook or the next whatever app that's going to be built. Instead of building it in a centralized Web 2 way, they pick a blockchain to build it on top of. And whether it's built on Solana or it's built on Telos, like, the user shouldn't really know. If the base technology and the people who are building things find value and say, oh, well, we'd rather build here because we could build anywhere, the customer's not going to know the difference. The customer's not going to be like, oh, we're going to go use this new streaming platform because it's built on top of, whatever. That's why I'm definitely interested in the tech behind the blockchain and how it's built, and different contract languages, different coding languages. I'm thinking okay, how many developers know this language? And I was researching Telos's languages, and it seems like you guys are developers are able to build in Rust, Go, C++. Could you kind of speak more to the languages, and does it make it easier for developers to build on Telos?
The languages that you list, so it's an interesting thing, and it's somewhat technical, but I'll do my best here. So when we launched 5 years ago, we launched with a smart contract platform that lets you, it's WASM, so it's WebAssembly. So WebAssembly is kind of like a really low level language, but there are a bunch of kind of standard languages, like you mentioned, Rust and Golang and C++ and everything that can compile into WASM. So our network, we call it our zero network or our native network, lets you write the contracts in C++. There's Rust. There's a TypeScript, which is it's actually assembly script, but it's just like TypeScript, which is JavaScript. It's a very common language for people to know. You can write the smart contracts in all these different languages, which is good. It's not just the language. You need to become familiar with the different APIs, like how do I store data in a table? How do I, verify a signature? Things like that you need to do in a smart contract. But those are the concepts, and actually using those concepts you can do with a language that many developers are familiar with. So then about 3 years ago, we set out to build an EVM, which you mentioned earlier. What is an EVM? So an EVM is an Ethereum virtual machine. And the Ethereum virtual machine, there's something called Viper, which is like a Python kind of based language, but it's mostly Solidity. It's a language that was written just for Ethereum smart contracts. And so in order to deploy a contract on an EVM, you need to write it in Solidity, it's a language that you only know if you've been writing smart contracts for an EVM. There's no other place that you would use Solidity as a language. So when you think about access to like mainstream developers, well, none of those mainstream developers know Solidity, although it's a pretty straightforward language to learn. As somebody who knows a lot of programming languages, it's the concepts are all simple. It's clean. There's programming languages whose whole purpose is to just be like really complex looking. So this one's one that's really simple to learn, but it's still a new language, right? But that being said, it is the language. It's the first language that you could ever write a smart contract in, right? It's the dominating language. Ethereum is the dominating smart contract platform. EVM as a technology is like the dominating kind of runtime that people have. There's a lot of tools, there's a lot of apps, there's a lot of wallets, there's a lot of open source software that you can just kind of glue together and build your application without having to like start from scratch. So there's so much like mature and highly available tooling and software for EVM, and there's so many developers that know Solidity and know how to write the contracts for EVM that it was a decision that was pretty obvious for us. Let's add an EVM to our network, so that people can write smart contracts, or they can not even write them, take the same smart contracts they've ran on Ethereum for years or that are open source, somebody else's contracts. They just want to deploy their own version of, Uniswap or PancakeSwap as a DEX on Telos. But we still offer half-second block times and really high throughput. So and it's decentralized because it's still the Telos network that we have all these like really great aspects of Telos, but now, but people didn't want to use it because they couldn't just deploy their Ethereum-based smart contracts, right? Or they couldn't use MetaMask. So now we have an EVM, which allows them to just come over and get all the benefits of decentralization and the performance and all the technology, but using the most familiar, tools that they have. And that's really proven. And in fact, when you mentioned kind of when you found Telos was around when we were building it, we started to get a lot of attention because it was being built and was going to be the fastest, shortest block time EVM, definitely at that time. And so that's where we started getting a lot of attention. And what we hoped to happen, proved to happen, is that got a lot more users, a lot more apps, a lot more activity because we now are compatible with all those tools. And what's, I think, super interesting is that the EVM, like our EVM, is actually written, it's a smart contract on Telos native, right? So it's a C++ smart contract on Telos native that's then compiled into WebAssembly and runs the EVM smart contract. So it's like a blockchain inside of a blockchain almost, where the EVM is still on the same network, same set of validators, same infrastructure, same hardware, same network, same token, same decentralization, same performance, all the attributes of Telos. It's just kind of like almost like an emulator, like you can play old Nintendo games on your computer through an emulator that knows how to run the Nintendo games. This is like an EVM emulator. It knows how to run the Ethereum contracts, but it's running still on Telos. We didn't have to launch a new network really. So it's kind of when people talk about layer ones and layer twos, it's like, well, it's a layer two, but it's actually part of the same blockchain as we've had for 5 years. And I think it's like a kind of a testament to how powerful the the Telos native network is that you can actually write a smart contract that can be the whole EVM and run the Solidity code too. So,
okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's like if someone's trying to take code or take something that's been written in Solidity on Ethereum, they can easily just transfer it over to Telos's blockchain if they want faster throughput or lower fees or no front running and these kind of things that you were talking about.
yeah.
Which, of course, I think from the developer standpoint would make a lot of sense, because if Ethereum's weird, it's like it's the beast, it's the behemoth, it has the most ecosystem, but it also is really expensive and it kind of like doesn't seem to work that well. I guess the layer twos are making it faster and cheaper and such. But the flip side to that I think about is that the high fees kind of bring value to the holder in a weird way, even though it like hurts the ecosystem. And I think about a lot of these low fee platforms. And I wonder, kind of getting into tokenomics, what your thoughts are on like what kind of drives demand for the native token as the ecosystem grows. And if say an app builds on top of Telos and they create their own token and users need to buy that token, is there a way that usage on the native network then brings back some sort of demand for the native token of Telos?
Yeah. I mean, there's, when you see your standard token utility kind of, on our native network, you have to stake the native token in order to be able to use the network. It's kind of it's like a gasless type transaction. You don't have to spend the token each time, but you have to have staked enough to be able to do the transactions. Inside the EVM, we followed the EVM standard, so it's a gas token. So inside the EVM, the Telos token is what you use to pay for gas. Instead of ETH on Ethereum, it's Telos on Telos EVM. And then those gas fees get burned, so it kind of reduces the supply. Or it offsets inflation, if you want to look at it that way. But then there's the other questions about not just for transactions and transaction fees, but all the other elements that you could use the native token of the network for. So voting, like I said, we have on-chain voting. So it's, on a proof of stake network, this is delegated proof of stake, so it's similar. If you want to be a validator, be a block producer, and receive the rewards for being a validator, you need to have a stake, or at least have people voting for you with their stake, so that you can rise up, be the top ranked validators that get to produce the blocks and earn the rewards. So that's not really a transaction fee, but it's a utility of the token. And the more demand there is for being a validator, the more demand there is for that stake. And then you use it to vote for anything on the chain. So anytime we need to make a decision about tokenomics, we need to make a decision about certain maybe critical features or certain things we'd want to do with the network that require the token holders to approve it, they have to vote. When they vote with their stake. So you're incentivized to have more of the stake to use towards voting, right? So governance purposes. And then, as you mentioned, layer twos, we've announced and are actively building. We're really focused a lot on ZK, right? So we recently released a white paper we can talk about. Alberto, our head of zero knowledge, he's got a ton of experience doing this type of stuff, zero knowledge with blockchain. And so we're focused on our first layer 2, which will be a ZK EVM based layer 2 that will add even more utility. And it's intended to be the first of hopefully many. We actually have interest beyond just this first one, but obviously you got to do one before you can do two. But the utility there is that for these layer 2s, you have things like sequencing, you have potentially data availability that needs to be addressed. There's just a number of different things that you need to, and the layer 2 has to actually pay gas fees to post all of its rollups to the layer 1, right? So there's a number of things as you add a single layer 2 that now the tokens on the main chain can be used for governance of the layer 2. Even if the layer 2 has its own gas token for its own fees, the layer 1 is still where, the decisions need to be made about kind of those governance critical things like sequencing, data availability, et cetera. So building into that layer 2 that we're launching, it's going to be a gaming sidechain that's really exciting and has some really cool like art and stuff going on with it, and a whole big quest, project that people can participate in to do the quests and, you know, earn the points and stuff. But the more of these layer 2s that we have, the more each of them needs to use the native token on Telos to manage its governance, right? So each one of these now is going to have the tokens needing to be used for locked up to, you know, become a sequencer, or, you know, as we evolve that layer 2 strategy to have decentralized sequencers and decentralized all these things. How do you decentralize the roles and responsibilities for the layer 2? Well, you use governance on the layer 1 to kind of vote and make those selections, and the, you know, the people that want to have those roles on the layer 2 need to stake and, you know, become entitled to those roles by doing that in the layer 1. So
no, that makes a lot of sense, because I'm always thinking about like in kind of intrinsic demand and incentive for, and wondering, okay, these projects are building on top of this thing or on top of the layer 2. Is there an incentive for them to create demand for, or does that create demand for that native token? And basically what you're saying is yes, it does. So that's good to.
And there's always speculation. I mean, this is crypto, right? People speculate all day about these things, right? But, you know, we try to focus on the tangible utility of the token, not just, you know, the speculative nature that comes with crypto.
Yeah, no, it is speculative and very high risky to be like putting your money investing in. So with Telos, the fees are burned, which keeps the inflation down.
More transactions is more gas fees. More gas fees, they all get burned. We didn't burn them for like a year. So the first burn was like, you know, I don't know, almost 100,000 tokens, I think. And then now we've been burning them each month and kind of announcing publicly how many there are. So with more activity, we can see more gas fees. And with more layer 2s rolling up to Telos, that's more activity on the main chain, not just for the rollups, for people bridging the tokens in and out. Each one of those, you know, the layer 2 to layer 1 bridge kind of adds even more activity, because a lot of that layer 2 tokens and assets kind of come through the layer 1. So kind of becomes a hub for those layer 2s and just drive more activity to, you know, to the layer 1. It's at the end of the day, we're kind of selling block space like real estate. We just want to increase more demand for, you know, putting transactions in blocks. And so the more we can do to drive that demand, the better. Sure. So just in like the past, I think 2 days, we announced the zero knowledge snark tour is, I believe, the term that was put on it. So our head of zero knowledge, Alberto, has been working for months now with some people that he's worked with before that he knew from the zero knowledge kind of there's not that many people that know how zero knowledge tech really works at its core. So he worked with some folks from IOHK, so Input Output Global, IOHK. They're the kind of the entity that is involved from the Cardano ecosystem, right? But he's been working with those engineers to publish this white paper that finally was released publicly earlier this week. And it's something I've been, you know, tracking, working with him, understanding, you know, kind of what the plan is for that. And so I'm really excited that that's out there. There's a lot of good media out there. He recorded a nice video that explains it. There's a light paper that's much easier to digest than the white paper. The white paper is a true white paper with, you know, the formulas and everything that, you know, you probably wouldn't understand. It's super complex stuff. Then the question is, you know, what is zero knowledge, right? And Alberto does a much better job than me in some of the videos he's got. But zero knowledge is the ability to prove you know something without divulging more than you need to divulge. So an example that everybody's maybe familiar with is for private transactions on a blockchain, so that you can prove that a transaction, you know, a transfer of value is valid without having to say who sent it, or maybe even what the amount is. But you actually prove that you now have 100 of some token without showing, you know, who sent it to you or how many transactions it was sent in. So it could have been 10 people that sent it to you or one. Like, all of that's kind of private, and that can be done on chain through zero knowledge proof. That way the transactions are private, but you still have the decentralized permissionless network kind of holding your balance of that asset. So zero knowledge is kind of like a black box that many people wouldn't understand. It's really complex math and some crazy kind of concepts behind it. It's been around for many years. I mean, it was, I think, on a chalkboard in the 70s, the concepts of zero knowledge proofs, and then they were put into software, and now software has been improved and computer hardware has been improved enough that you can efficiently like do zero knowledge stuff on kind of our laptops, and people that want to use it kind of have access to the software without needing to be PhDs in math to actually build a zero knowledge program. You can do it much easier now. So the technology is really catching up and allowing zero knowledge to be used in more and more places. So another really great example of zero knowledge besides just private transactions is maybe like an ID example. So there's a whole really exciting realm of zero knowledge like ZK AI or ZK ML. So if you think about it, and Alberto actually did this before he got into blockchain, he was doing like AI KYC. So when you think about KYC, not just for crypto exchanges, but KYC is a thing that happens with your banks. You have to prove your identity, right? And for us that have done it before in crypto, you hold up your ID and you hold up your face, right? And it looks and it sees that you are over 18 and you live, in the United States, right? That's maybe a criteria. But what else did they get? Well, they recorded your entire ID and your face. Now, where's that data, right? What happens if the people that just did that KYC get hacked, right? Now your address, your age, date of birth, face, height, weight, eye color, hair color, all that stuff's boom on the dark net, right? People are buying it, pretending to be you. Who knows what's going to happen, right? So with if you think about it, right? I mean, that's that's the thing.
That's super scary. I don't even want to think about that because you do it all the time.
The AI programs now kind of do that. So it's AI, but it's still AI running on another computer. So what zero knowledge can do is it can run that AI program on your computer and create this proof. And the only thing that ever leaves your computer is this zero knowledge proof that basically proves you're over 18 and you live in the United States. You didn't have to share your ID, your picture of your face and all that stuff to prove it to like the bank or to the whatever it is that you're doing it for, the exchange, whatever the use case is. So if you think about that as an example, it's like being able to prove something without having to divulge everything, just proving a very explicit fact about something can be done without releasing all of the private stuff that normally in the past has gone with it. And the other really interesting use case is the layer twos. So for layer twos, just like you don't want to show your ID, that's like private data. But you can also use the same technology to just not have all of the data be required. So for like a layer two, all the transactions that happen on the layer two, they are public transactions. Maybe you're not trying to hide anything that goes on in the layer two. There's nothing private about them, but you don't want to have to take every transaction and put it on the layer one so the layer one can make sure that they're valid. So using zero knowledge, the private data is not actually like sensitive data. It's just a lot of data that you don't want to like cram into the layer one, right? So you can use it for scaling because now you take all those transactions on the layer one and you prove that they're all valid. And the only thing that you really need to prove, the layer two, you take all the transactions on the layer two and you prove that they're valid using zero knowledge. And then the only thing you have to publish to the layer one is the proof that these 1,000 transactions were valid and the result, like the end result of them. So without going into too much detail, you can kind of imagine that concept that like zero knowledge proof allows you to prove something without giving out all the information. A lot of times that information is private sensitive data, but for like layer two and scaling blockchain type use cases, the data isn't necessarily sensitive private data. It's just a lot of data that you don't want to like burden the main chain, the layer one with. So that's kind of where the scaling and ZK EVMs and layer two scaling through zero knowledge comes in, because it's also trustless. So you're not relying on an oracle. You're not relying on some group of people to do the right thing. You're relying on this zero knowledge mathematical software that's proving something with certainty, it's trustless. You just are trusting this math algorithm, zero knowledge technology, as opposed to trusting, 5 of 7 people to do the right thing and not, get arrested or lose their keys or something like that. So, so zero knowledge is a really compelling technology for blockchain scaling, blockchain privacy, and general, technical privacy. It's got applications, outside of blockchain too. So the white paper that we put out, that's super interesting. Check out the video and the content we have about that, is a scaling solution for zero knowledge proofs. So in terms of blockchain concepts, if you get a proof on a blockchain to verify that it's a valid proof, it takes a fair amount of time. Like a transaction that has a zero knowledge proof in it can take, use a lot of gas, and cost a lot of gas fees. And you can only do so many proof verifications, per second, if you think about it that way. So the use cases that I described here and the potential to actually adopt this technology is kind of limited from a blockchain perspective, and maybe even traditional technical world perspective, by how many proofs you can actually verify at once. So what Alberto's paper does is it describes a decentralized network of proof aggregation. So if you can prove that something with zero knowledge is true, what you can actually do is you can have a zero knowledge program that verifies 2 proofs and it combines them into 1 proof. And you can do this aggregation that basically takes 1,000 proofs and proves those proofs in other zero knowledge proofs, like, Inception, like turtles all the way down. And what you end up with is 1 proof that represents 1,000 proofs. And on chain, on the blockchain, you just have to verify the 1 proof. So it basically allows that use case of ID verification. Maybe every transaction on the blockchain needs to include an ID proof that just proves you're 18 or proves you're a member of some, whatever it is, right? Whatever the proof does. But now you can think, okay, well, these proofs now can actually be used at scale because we have a system that off-chain will aggregate them all. And then on-chain, all you end up with is just a single proof that the chain can actually process efficiently. You need this type of technology to really get that mass adoption.
Yeah, to be able to use a ledger, but that everyone, if you want to privatize some of that information on the ledger, but also, so in a way though, it could essentially privatize data in like a selective way, that you can like make certain parts of the data private and people can't see, but you're releasing just other parts of the data, only specific things that prove whatever information you're trying to give, but you don't have to just give out like all the data basically. Is that kind of?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily, everybody's going to go, not everybody. I think people in the blockchain and crypto industry are not going like, oh, it's how you do money laundering. Oh, that's how, criminals can, do whatever crimes they're doing and pay for them. You can also do it in a way that's actually compliant, right? There are ways that you can do it so that the public ledger doesn't reveal, all your payroll, right? So your employees aren't having to know each other's paychecks by just looking at, all the transfers that happened at the beginning of the month from the company's treasury or whatever. So you can solve those things, but you can also do it in a way so that should, a government entity need to, they could come to you and you could say, well, yeah, here's the proof, right? It's not on chain, but if you really want to know that I'm doing things properly, I can share it with you and prove that this is me and I sent it to them or whatever the case might be. So there's ways to actually increase, regulatory compliance without sacrificing the privacy that, we all have when we go to the ATM and deal with our, banks.
That's exciting. That sounds like some really useful tech. Sounds like something that's going to have a lot of use cases. We're kind of getting to the end here. I kind of want to ask a more general question about artificial intelligence and like blockchains and crypto. What's kind of your overall viewpoint? Like I'm trying to connect where AI is going to affect and be utilized and how it's going to play a role in crypto and in blockchain tech. How do you see that kind of playing out, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, there's so many different, developers, if you turn on the Copilot plugin when you're writing code, it And I wasn't a big adopter of AI. Like it took me a while to even start playing with Chat GPT, but I realized it's just a better Google search on a certain level. And then I really took a long time. It's been less than a month since I turned on the plugin in the IDE. So, but now that I've done it, when I'm writing code, it actually like sometimes you pause and it just suggests a few lines of code that are exactly what I would write, and it's pretty impressive. So just in terms of not even blockchain related general development, it can really make you more efficient. You can't trust it. You got to really verify what it tells you, but it can really make things be more efficient at the very least there. And then when you start thinking about blockchain and where it can fit in, there's definitely a huge opportunity, I think, for decentralized compute. So, and zero knowledge actually kind of comes a bit into play as well, where if you have multiple people that have hardware and they have graphics cards and everything, and you want some AI model to run on it, whether it generates an image, whatever the model's doing, right? Maybe it's doing medical stuff, right? There's all these different use cases for machine learning and AI, and they take a lot of compute power. So if you have a decentralized system where, people don't need to be part of, an enterprise, a big business that offers compute, they could just be people that have a few machines somewhere in the world, right? And, machine learning isn't like I need it to happen in 5 milliseconds thing. It takes a little time. So if it has to go, across the Atlantic Ocean to the machine that runs the AI program, that's fine, because you add 100 milliseconds to a 5-second, duration. It's not a big deal. So you could really think about decentralized compute and the payment to the people for the decentralized compute, because now you have, if you were to do this through non-blockchain, you have to deal with how do they get paid, how do they know they're going to get paid, all these kind of questions come up, and having to deal with those things becomes a challenge. But with blockchain, if you design a system, and one of our developers actually has a prototype, he's way into AI, and he's got this system where, you request a model to run, you give it the prompt for the model, and it does text or it does images. It's got text to image, image to image. So you can kind of, or text to text, right? So you have all these different ways you can run the model and get back a result. And it's a decentralized compute system. So now people from all over the world can, they have a GPU that's idle, they can plug into the system, and then they could participate. They could pick up one of the tasks, send it back, and get rewarded some token on chain through the decentralized kind of permissionless, AI system that they have there. And then, you can imagine that growing more and more, and people using that because they have, a lower fee. The people offering the hardware actually get paid for their hardware. So it's kind of like a win-win, because it's cheaper for the end user that wants the model ran, and then people get an opportunity to earn something with their hardware. So there's a bunch of different kind of use cases. I think that there's also, and if you go to like the ZK AI thing, so if it's like a deterministic model, which means if you give it the same prompt, it's always going to give you the same result, as opposed to like being kind of a randomly generated thing, then you can use ZK for that, right? So that, like, let's say it's more like a medical thing. That there's this model that it's critical that model is the one that generated the result. So, like Chat GPT 3.5 versus 4, you want to know that it ran 4, right? Because it's important that you use the best model to get your result. If you use ZK, zero knowledge can prove, even though you didn't run the model on your computer, right? Even though you didn't like see it run, it's possible to use zero knowledge to prove that this model is the one that executed that program. So again, it's another use case of ZK. You don't need to know, like, having ran it on your computer, but you can get the zero knowledge proof that proves Chat GPT 4, for example, or a critical, medical data analysis model, that actually is guaranteed. That model is the one that ran against the data set you gave it. And then you break down barriers, because you don't care who runs it. You don't care if it's a computer in South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, the United States. It doesn't matter who runs it, right? You just make sure that you get a proof that it ran the model that you wanted. whoever gives it to you first gets paid. And you can really imagine that because when you eliminate trust and you don't care who the counterparty is, because you're trusting the zero knowledge proof, you're trusting the technology, a lot of things can open up that you no longer, like I trust OpenAI. If I say run ChatGPT-4, I kind of believe that they're going to do it. It's their product. But if it was decentralized, right, it's just some stranger on the internet, how do I trust that they're doing what they say? Well, that's again, ZK can come in and solve that. So then you don't care who it is. And then it opens up, the opportunity is anybody's to do that, right? I don't care who it is. Just give me proof and give me the results, and then I'm happy.
Yeah, decentralized compute sounds like a very useful, a really great use case.
It's almost like Bitcoin, but maybe more useful. That the electricity going into it is actually, it's kind of like, right, proof of work, but it's like useful proof of work.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's really cool. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to like get that kind of practical in a use case way that AI, and just from the coding developing perspective, to be able to write languages quicker, to be able to code faster, to be able to develop anything in tech it's gonna speed up and ramp that.
And audit, find bugs. I mean, protect the end user. Like, I'm sure that there's a dozen projects out there that, are doing that to find vulnerabilities, and hopefully most of them are doing it not so they can exploit the vulnerability, but so they can actually report it and prevent people from using that contract that, is exploitable, right? So, I mean, I've seen at least a few times people get exploited, and somebody goes and runs the smart contract through ChatGPT, and ChatGPT identifies the vulnerability right away. And then that's kind of embarrassing. Like, oh, you guys didn't even, you didn't even try running it through the free AI. It would have, you could have saved these people their money that got, victims of the hack if you had just, run it through the AI. So putting everything through an AI that's on there, like on a chain, and showing, the result would be probably something I expect, we should see that hopefully soon. Just at the very least, if AI can find a vulnerability, let's just red flag it and tell people not to use that contract, right?
That's great. I feel like from so many industries, they're looking at AI and being like, is this going to just replace everything or just completely make this obsolete? And I feel like narrative wise, at least like all the AI stocks and everything are going crazy. And I feel like the crypto narrative and the brand of crypto has definitely been hurt from the last bear market and everything. But I think we're doing well. We're coming back. And if intrinsically the AI is going to bring value to blockchains and cryptocurrency, that's a really great sign, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think it will. I think it's inevitable.
Cool. Jesse, I really appreciate you taking the time. This was an awesome conversation. I think you gave some really great information. And I'm just looking forward to see what Telos keeps doing. I'm going to keep following you guys. And I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.